everybody, welcome to the weekly news recap for the 21st to the 27th of July 2025, coming from you from a brand new location. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Let's get into it. So we're going to start with some fallout from last week's story where Steam had started to delist adult games as it was coming under pressure from Visa, MasterCard, and a couple of other payment processors. So following suit, itch.io is now starting to see the same kind of pressure from Visa, MasterCard, and other payment processors. So due to pressure from payment processors like Visa and MasterCard, itch.io have de-indexed adult content such that it is no longer visible or searchable on the site. So you would have to have a direct link, basically, if you wanted to get something. Some adult games will be permanently removed from itch.io. Owners say it doesn't clarify here if they mean itch.io's owners or the video games owners themselves. I think it's also important to point out for itch.io that they don't just sell video games, they also sell board games, they also sell literature, they also sell poetry, like this kind of stuff. There's a lot of other creative outlets on itch.io that are usually lean more towards things that other platforms wouldn't allow on their platforms. So things like LGBT stuff, trans issues, suicide prevention stuff, that kind of thing, diatribes on these kind of things that typically we'll say more mainstream platforms shy away from showing. So having itch.io also seeing this pressure is actually like a very big problem for that kind of thing. Anyway, from itch.io's creator Leif Corcoran, the situation developed rapidly. We had to act urgently to protect the platform's core payment infrastructure. Unfortunately, this meant it was not realistic to provide creators with advance notice before making this change. We know this is not ideal and we apologize for the abruptness of this change. So it seems that they had a similar situation, Valve, that pressure came from Visa and MasterCard pretty abruptly, and that they were effectively saying, yeah, change this now or we just won't facilitate any payments, like right now. So they weren't able to let anybody know ahead of time. The fact that they're actually putting out a blog post about it is better than what Valve did, because Valve, as far as I'm aware, still haven't addressed the issue. They just slipped it into their terms of service and then let it go after that. Anyway, also pointing out this article that yes, Steam had the same situation. Steam has also started a crackdown against sex games that resulted in the delisting of hundreds of titles. Steam enacted these changes due to payment processors because loss of payment methods would prevent customers from being able to purchase other titles and game content on Steam. So it effectively, this literally affects Steam's, Valve's bottom line. itch.io is in a similar situation. They said more or less the same thing. They had to protect the core payment structure for other people. And again, people's livelihoods are attached to itch.io, to Steam, to Epic, to all of these things. It's not fair that certain games are being singled out for this kind of thing, but it's also not fair for it to affect other games on the platform. I suppose it depends which side of it you want to come down on. Could Valve have made a stand about this kind of thing? You would think Steam probably has the money to go up against Visa, MasterCard, whoever. Maybe. Kind of feel like payment platforms like them probably have a significant legal team. Itch, on the other hand, very much do not have that kind of money. They are a very lean company. It's only like a handful of people running a website. It's very bare bones. Anyway, itch.io is currently undergoing a comprehensive audit to check if offending games meet the requirements set forth by payment processors. So we have the same situation here that I talked about last week with Steam, in that Steam already had a policy that they allowed adult games on. They started that, I forget the exact year, but they started it a while ago. They had no issue with the games that are on there. Any games that they did have issue with are taken down very quickly. We'll talk about that later on in this article. But they're being forced to do this by the payment processors, so it is I think the term going around now is financial censorship, which is essentially Visa and MasterCard are saying we don't like this. So either take it down or we won't facilitate your payments anymore. Itch.io have a similar thing. They were like very much like one of the only platforms that allowed certain content to be allowed. And I know talking around certain content, but it's not just porn games. Like there are, as I said, LGBT stuff, mental health stuff, anti-government stuff, you know, like these kind of things that the powers that be would be very happy to see disappeared from the internet. Anyway, but yes, it is the payment processors themselves deciding what goes on a third party's platform. That's not good. That's not a good thing. Like, the US has a First Amendment for the government not being allowed to do these things. You think a private enterprise should be allowed to do it? I don't know. I don't think so. Anyway, vaguely defined payment processor compliance measures. Yes, Visa and MasterCard are more or less coming down the side of we're not going to tell you. It's up to you to decide. So that's trying to get compliance in advance, which again is another authoritarian move. Really shouldn't be something we should be seeing from our payment processors. Anyway, over on social media, people have been speaking out about it. It's been getting a lot of back and forth, we'll say, from different sides of the gaming side of things, but also just from a civil rights standpoint. This is quite obviously censorship. Anyway, the potential long-term repercussions of allowing a third party to dictate what is and isn't acceptable on a platform. These game removals are happening due to a campaign levied by Australian group Collective Shout. So they have already taken responsibility, I guess, if you for Steam last week, pushing back on it, and it would seem that it is effectively the same campaign from this Australian group. They are very much of the evangelical US Republican money-backed situation. A similar group is responsible for the UK's online safety bill that's going through at the moment, that's causing a lot of problems online of people not being happy that they have to put their passport to a third party. And obviously for privacy reasons, that is an extremely bad thing. Like if it was pushing it up to the government, that would be one thing. But pushing it up to a unelected and I can't think of the word, but uncountable third party, that could absolutely be leaked, breached, hacked, whatever, very easily. And now you have a list of people and their internet history, which is ripe for exploitation, blackmail, impersonation, all sorts of things. It's an extremely stupid bill. But these groups are all for it. This is right out of the Heritage Foundation shit. This is right out of the Project 2025 stuff of trying to crush any kind of other thought. So they're going to start with the easy ones, which is porn. You know, protect the kids. It's always the first wedge to get in there, and then it'll be what other obscene content do we not want our children seeing? Well, of course, we don't want them seeing anything about the gays or trans or mental health stuff. And then, well, what else do we not want them to see? Oh, well, this is anti-American speech now. They're saying that there should be labor laws and what have you. And it just very quickly becomes overt authoritarian censorship. So keep an eye out, because there's almost certainly a group in your location doing the same kind of thing that Collective Shout is trying to do. The EU itself is already trying to push ahead with a similar online safety act that is happening in the UK. They're going to try to make it happen as a thing in the EU. Right now it hasn't been implemented, but they are kind of pushing countries to make it happen. So if you don't want a random third-party processor, which will be almost certainly a US-based one, to have your passport and your internet history associated with it, maybe say something to your local representative. Anyway, they had an open letter to payment processors a while back in April that were talking how Steam were profiting from rape, incest, and child abuse. The letter lists a number of executives at these companies by name and title, which sure sounds like a threat to me, and really probably should have been investigated about that, but it wasn't. Anyway, Valve do not profit from any of these kind of things. Any games that have this kind of stuff in it are taken down. almost immediately. Anyway, one that they did single out is a game titled No Mercy, which does effectively have sexual assault in it. In fact, it is the central thesis of the game, I think. Anyway, it was taken down pretty much the exact day that it went up, and it was definitely down by the time the open letter was put out. So they don't really have a leg there, but whatever, they got their way. A number of games do not have these kind of issues that they're talking about in their open letter, but the games got taken down anyway because compliance in advance. Visa and MasterCard did not point out what the issues are. They just said blanket porn games. So Valve have to make a decision. Do they want litigation, or are they just going to take the game down? And they went with taking the game down, and it seems are doing the same thing. So pointed out here how using porn or unsavory things like sexual assault, suicide, non-consensual things, incest, bestiality, what have you, things that are probably easy to find people who are against. Anyway, unsavory subjects, and also they're illegal. Anyway, unsavory subjects does not seem like a hill worth dying on, so they're like, oh, whatever. Those games are bad and awful, and I don't want to see them anyway. But no, when they come after games that you do actually like. So other games that they have singled out alongside No Mercy, which remember has sexual assault in it, they also decided Detroit Become Human was a problem. Why? The civil rights part would be my guess. I don't actually know why they had an issue with Detroit Become Human. Hunipop is like a hentai puzzle dating, so like, I mean, that's just porn. You know, obviously they had an issue with that. Why Detroit Become Human? You could argue there are some kind of sexual assault elements in it, but it's barely there. Anyway, whatever. The worry is that by booking the pressure from groups like Collective Shout, platforms like Steam pave the way for more extreme censorship measures, which is, you know, a slippery slope argument, but this is very much what they're going for. As I said, the Collective Shout group are backed by evangelical things. You can tie them all the way back to the Heritage Foundation. Anyway, it is a very fucking slippery slope and a very quick slope for the right-wing religious groups to go from no sex games to no games with any LGBTQ themes either, and as I've been talking about this already, they'll just find what else is obscene. Also, something to point out, Collective Shout are against Grand Theft Auto 5 for a similar situation, which is an extremely popular game that does have certain themes in it. Now, they don't go into incest or whatever, but, you know, they find it to be reprehensible. What else would they find to be reprehensible? They'd probably find Devil May Cry to be reprehensible because it has demon worship in it or something, or Dungeons and Dragons. You know, go back to the Satanic Panic shit, Reefer Madness shit. You know, anything about drug-related uses, that would definitely be flagged for them. What's the name of the, like, there's a popular like indie game going around now that's about drug dealing. I forget what it's called. Anyway, but yeah, that would be taken down, definitely. Anyway, the group will move on to other targets that merely contain sex in some form or another. So once they get their foot in the door, they'll just start pressuring Visa and MasterCard to do more things and more things and more things. And right now, they're bowing to that pressure. Another aspect that's added fuel to the fire is that there are now being consequences outside just the storefronts. So Waypoint is a gaming vertical over on Vice. So they put like focusing on gaming articles. They had an article on Collective Shout like last week that was then pulled by management. No reason given, probably litigation. The author of the original article, alongside a number of other freelancers, just decided to quit. We're just not going to work for you if you're going to censor actual journalism. Like, it's important to point out that when articles have problems or have to be updated because there is incorrect information or anything like that, they're usually editor's notes kind of thing. You know, it's very rarely is the article taken down entirely. So this is a massive overstep in terms of like journalism ethics. Anyway. Gamers are starting to mobilize against Collective Shout because there's attention being brought that there's a bill that proposes limiting the extent to which payment processors can interfere with business decisions on the basis of political or reputational concerns. So this would be a thing of Visa and MasterCard basically have to accept payment if all other legal things are you know, in check. All the I's are dotted, all the T's are crosses. Just because you have a problem with whatever the product is, whatever the service is, tough. You have to process the payment. Which really, I don't know why that wasn't a thing already. But anyway, there is a bill going through Australian government, I think, right now. Hopefully that makes its way to other countries. Anyway, there is also a petition on change.org. How do you feel about change.org petitions? I personally don't think they ever make any real difference, but Stop Killing Games was also a change.org petition. Other locations in other countries have other similar petitions going up. I will try to find the EU one and put a link to it in the notes if I can find it. There is an ACLU one going on at the moment. MasterCard, Sex Workers Work, End Your Own Just Policies. This is more of a bigger, broader thing because MasterCard have, for years now, refused to do anything to do with sex work. And I think there is some sort of legal onus on them at the moment that says if they do like sex trafficking or something like that, if it's found that they facilitated it in any way, that they can be legally responsible for it. So there does probably have to be some carve out to say that they're protected from that kind of thing. But I think as it stands, they're not. Anyway, but that doesn't mean that they can just say blanketly anything to do with sex has a potential sex trafficking thing. I think they're taking a rather large hammer to that. Anyway, there are other petitions around the place. Platforms like itch were celebrated because of their willingness to sell games that couldn't exist on other storefronts, not just games. As I pointed out, they have other things. Anyway, and creators of adult games have been some of the platform's biggest champions. As I said earlier, like, this was one of the few platforms where they could sell this kind of thing. Anyway, the immediate yielding to parties with ill intentions has eroded goodwill towards these platforms, if not shattered the illusion that the PC is an emancipated space compared to more buttoned-up landscape of consoles. I think there is the idea that the PC, or just the internet in general, you know, if you can download and sideload your game onto a PC, onto a mobile phone, if you can figure out how to do it. At least on Android, it's not that complicated. But the point is, the fact that there's a payment processor attached to it means they are now beholden to these third parties that they should not be, in my opinion, but they are, as the case currently stands. Anyway, my community has routinely been unjustly targeted by bigots who often use porn bans as a means to justify the banning as non-pornographic content. The banning of non-pornographic, I imagine it's supposed to say. This is just coming from an online petition comment. As a result, I'm heavily opposed to any and all banning of sexual content because banning sexual content never stops there. It always includes non-sexual things. As such, the fight to protect people's rights to sexual expression is vital for protecting my right to exist. So it sounds there. Trans or LGBT of some kind, what have you. Could just be interracial couples, you know. Evangelicals don't like that either. Anyway. Itch.io had this to say, though, I'm sorry we cannot share more information at this time. We are getting a full understanding of the situation ourselves. So, if you look at the date of this video, this is obviously not going up on the usual time that I put this out. Itch have come back since, but I will look into that on next week's video, or the weekend's video. Anyway, I'll leave a link to this ACLU petition if you feel like supporting it, but I would also encourage you to hunt out your own locations. Petition, which I am planning to do after this. Anyway, outside of that, some updates. So we have a new game announced from Saber Interactive, the people behind the Warhammer Space Marine 2 game. So this is going to be a Hellraiser video game, which I don't think there's ever been one. I think this might be the first one. I know Pinhead has been in like Dead by Daylight, but I don't think he's been in anything else. Anyway, this game would absolutely not be allowed to be sold if fucking Visa and MasterCard had their way. Anyway, or not Visa and MasterCard, but Collective Shout in particular. It's also fairly graphic scenes. Anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, it looks like it's like a first-person puzzly type thing. What combat necessarily would be in it or anything like that, who knows? There is also a Red Band trailer, if you prefer, over on the Hellraiser site itself. It's a bit gorier and also a bit more titillating. Anyway, moving on. Chronos the New Dawn had a fairly lengthy kind of gameplay playthrough here, where they are going through a kind of hospital location, and just wanted to put this video in because I've kind of felt that Chronos looks like Dead Space for a while now. Like, as soon as it was announced, pretty much it was like, this is Dead Space. And that's not a problem, because EA obviously aren't making any more Dead Space, so at least somebody is. But a lot of this gameplay just kind of highlighted that, yeah, it's like, overtly it's Dead Space, because there are so many things just in this one gameplay section that are like right out of Dead Space. Let's see if I can find a few of them. So there's this bit here, this kind of changing of gravity, like launching yourself to land on a different location, which is right out of Dead Space 1. This kind of gravity shifting mechanic, very much a Dead Space thing. Kind of like the enemies have a lot of the necromorph stuff going on with them. I doubt I'm going to be able to find it, but there is also a point where they approach a crate, and I was saying to myself while I was watching, I was like, if they fucking stomp on this to open it, then it's just Dead Space, and they do. They do the big Isaac Clarke stomp. This isn't a problem. Dead Space games are good, except for the third one, which is, it's not bad, it's just not great. Anyway, Chronos I think is later this year. I don't think it has a release date yet, but yeah, it looks like it'll be an interesting one. Moving on, games that do have a release date. Morose Protocol, or Morris Protocol, or whatever way it's meant to be pronounced. It's a first person, kind of System Shock, but also a roguelike. So that'll be a bit of a weird one. To see how that plays out. I think it is a little bit more combat heavy than something like System Shock is a little bit more immersive sim rather than combat. Anyway, we'll see how that plays out. It's September at some point. 4th? Yeah, 4th of September for Morris Protocol, and then Gigasword. Also, some stage in September, I think. I played a little bit of the demo of Gigasword. I'm gonna skip ahead until we get some actual gameplay. So the kind of conceit with Gigasword is that you carry a big fucking sword. A Gigasword, if you like. And there then is like puzzle elements to it, that the sword itself is too heavy, so you can't jump normally with it, so you need to stash it somewhere so you can do some jumps. There are switches that use the sword in specific cases and stuff like that. I thought it was a fun demo. Interested to see more of the full game. I think 2nd of October for that one. Also, this news is also somewhat out of date at this point because I'm recording this video on the Wednesday instead of the Sunday. But anyway, Elden Ring, Night Rain duos are on the way, and it was meant to be this week, but the tsunami situation over in Asia has halted that kind of rollout for that. So it'll probably be, hopefully, if everyone's okay, be soon enough after that. Anyway, why it launched without duos, I don't know, but it's a situation we're in. Anyway, free game over in the Epic Game Store. You have even less time than normal to redeem this one. Anyway, it's Legion TD2. It is a tower defense. That's what the TD means. Tower defense game. And you have like probably less than a day now at this point to redeem it. Those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you want to play something right now? You can play Wushang Fallen Feathers, which is not a sequel to Wukong. Promise. Anyway, it is a Souls-like-y game. You're playing, I forget her name. She has some kind of demon infection that is giving her kind of bird-like countenance appendage. Her arm has like feathers, but they can be like fired out as projectiles and stuff like that. You have different abilities, and I think she has like a brief kind of horror at some point. Anyway, it's very much a Soulsy type affair. I'm gonna skip ahead to some combat stuff. What I've seen from reviews are mostly good. I think there's one feeling that it is maybe a bit cheap difficulty-wise. Depending on the build you go with, you might find that some bosses are basically unbeatable. And then over on the PC side of things, there seems to be some performance issues that are being people are review bombing it because of it. Depends on your own PC, I suppose, whether you'll get those performance issues, but I guess enough of them are there that it is affecting the review scores. Anyway, what I've seen console-wise, not having those problems. So if you have a PlayStation or Xbox, that might be the better way to go. Anyway, elsewhere, Wheel World is a kind of exploratory thing. It's a bit more about like a relaxation vibe. So just exploring this world on your bike. You can like customize it. I don't think it affects the bike itself. I think it's purely a cosmetic thing. And there are some races and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's just kind of exploring the world on your bike, just having a relaxing time. Last one, Split. So Split is kind of an interesting one. This is from the same developer, Bookshot Roulette. It's a pretty short game, and it is very much like a kind of analog. You're very much in a kind of hacker space kind of thing to it. It is in some ways a typing game, if you want to think of it that way. I don't think there's any mouse controls at all. I am interested to play it though, because some of the puzzles and some of the like riddles are interesting, and it is kind of like you're very much like not necessarily having to know how to navigate a computer entirely from the command line, but it would help if you did. Anyway, fortunately though, it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games, the video game industry. So this is continuing kind of fallout from the Microsoft Xbox layoffs. It's difficult to work when you're looking at a graveyard. This is coming from the Zenimax staff. So game developer rather, had a pretty long talk with some people who work at Zenimax. It's all anonymous. Just, what's it like working there now? What was it like working there when the layoffs were happening and stuff like that? And it just kind of paints a picture of how Microsoft were just extremely shit at just letting people know if they had a job still or not. Like extremely inhumane, extremely you're just a number situation. Like you're meant to hide that. You're not meant to be so naked about it. Right? Anyway, 3 weeks ago, Microsoft laid off about 9,000 workers. A lot of them were in the video game division. Employees at the company's Zenimax media subsidiary were, affected by it. They had one of their games cancelled. A good few people were laid off. Microsoft's decision to force people out the door hasn't just caused widespread upheaval and emotional distress, but as some employees tell us, will also hamper the productivity of those left behind. So it is not just a case of, okay, we've laid off these people, now get back to work. You've laid off people who are like vital to the game, to the project, whatever. They had knowledge that we don't have access to anymore. And also, morale is in the toilet. So yeah, anyway. These layoffs employees were blindsided by the way the cuts were communicated to employees and the way that they were in fact not communicated in any way whatsoever. In the last few minutes, I've unfortunately lost access to literally everything. No Slack, email, nothing is working. We have an off-work Discord, but it's all people just freaking out and nobody has any information. So yeah, good shit. On top of that, there is obviously a logistics problem in that since you've now frozen everybody out of their email, how are you going to contact them to let them know they have an interview with HR? It's like staff were frozen out of their channels before HR had made contact. So like considering we don't have any email now, I don't know how they're even supposed to contact us. Like good move. Real logistics fucking wizards here. Anyway, union member Paige Branson to say that it was one of the worst days at the job I've ever had in my entire life. Microsoft failed to effectively clarify who would be impacted by the layoffs, so they just let everybody worry for their own job. Anyway, those who were eventually laid off were absolutely crucial to the success of Elder Scrolls Online and integral to the everyday functioning of the studio, which suggests that they just looked at a couple of names at a couple of numbers and just picked people. That they didn't do any kind of due diligence to see if we let this person go, how badly is it going to affect the project? No, they just picked a couple of people. Like, I say a couple of people, it's like a couple of hundred people. Anyway, this is a betrayal of trust of the highest magnitude. The company is now talking to shareholders first and developers second. So they're not even talking to their own employees before they make these decisions, have these layoffs. It's just number go up, which we're not surprised about, but like, it's important to get this information from people who are working there. Anyway, talking about how the layoffs were done. It's not okay. It wasn't normal. I don't care how many times they do it and try to make it seem like it was normal. It's not. The way they do it is inhumane. I don't care how much they say that it's dignified or they want to do it a respectful way. It's not. Like we've seen, like it's lip service at best from corporate. Some people were here for 15 years and cut out, making it so that people have to rush to type a goodbye message into Slack to their colleagues that they've been working with on various projects. And remember, they would have been locked out of Slack as well, so they might even got to say that. They've been making your corporation money for 15 years is disgusting. It is disgusting. If I could get any message to any executive right now, it would be to review this process because it's not normal and it's not okay. And I'm sure they'll get right on that. Anyway, asking if they could talk to upper management, if they could get them to, what would you say to them? I would get on my knees and beg right now to please talk to people and ask them what this is like on the ground level before sending out blast emails that you do. So this is somewhat in response, well, it's not quite in response to Phil Spencer's message where he just said, oh, sorry about the layoffs, but games are doing great. Thanks. Or Sundar Pichai, is it Sundar Pichai? Is Microsoft, who's saying like Microsoft is thriving even though layoffs in the last 3 years? Anyway, you're too far away to have any idea how hollow these emails are. He says maybe not intentionally. I think it's intentional because they don't want to. They prefer the insulation, basically. I don't know what they can do at this point to win back trust from the consumers and some of their employees. Consumers will be easily swayed, unfortunately. Just throw out another Call of Duty and they'll forget all about it. Anyway, I continued to think back to Tango Gameworks and Arcane Austin, and watching that happen is now the second worst day of my career. These mass layoffs affect real people and real families and throw their lives into disarray. I wish for empathy is the core of my messaging. I wish for people to be empathetic and think about the human cost when it comes to all this. And think about all of the people whose lives have been just fucked up. Even the people who kept their job have lost friends, have lost partners in one case. Their husband. It's a husband and wife who were working together who are now having to be split. And there's a case of, do you stay with the company who fired your partner? There's a question about loyalty there, I guess. I don't know if they have that argument. Maybe they can say that, they still pay really well. Maybe we should just suck it up. Who knows? Anyway, Microsoft has just erased decades of experience, as I was saying, since they don't care who they're getting rid of. Oh, we're paying that person too much. This senior developer who knows the ins and outs of the entire project. Let's lay them off. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, this makes it harder for the developers who kept their jobs. A lot of practical knowledge just disappeared overnight. Everyone left now has to pick up the pieces as best they can. The morale and general confusion of it all has extended into our general workflow. We used to have very reliable people working on things that are not there anymore. They were integral. I feel like they were numbers on a sheet that got cut, but the real application of what they were doing was integral to making everything run correctly. So again, they just picked the people who they felt were being paid too much or could be let go without checking what the fuck they actually did on a day-to-day basis. Anyway, Microsoft says that the cuts were about streamlining workflows and making studios more agile, but word on the ground is that you've just made their job harder. This carcass of workers that remains is somehow supposed to keep shipping award-winning games. Exactly. How they expect them to do that when most of the experienced team is gone and you haven't replaced them. Looks like a lot of people are moving between projects to fill in the position of someone who was laid off, and it probably took them a good 6 months to figure it out. As someone who does work on software, you can't just drop into a project and be at full speed right away. You need to get a feel for the project, figure out where everything is, figure out the workflow of the team and so on. Like, it's not something where you can just pick them up and drop them and they'll be at maximum efficiency right away. It takes a while. It takes weeks, months. Anyway, Microsoft just took everything that could have been great about the culture and collaboration and decimated it. Morale is terrible. It's grotesque. People are stressed. They're crying. A lot of us, those were some of our best friends, roommates. In my case, it was my partner. And I'm not a unique story. I don't see how we get through this work without bringing some people back. So that's kind of referencing that they're probably going to have to hire back some of the more experienced people if they want any of these projects to get anywhere. And then the rest of this article is talking about how being part of the union kept a lot of people from being laid off, and it's possible it pushed layoffs to other companies that don't have union representation. Which is potentially a reason to get more, but the reason layoffs were able to happen, the unionized company in the first place, is mostly a case of there not being enough. Anyway, speaking of layoffs and games being cancelled, 1047 Games lays off developers. CEO says he's made many mistakes. He sure has. Anyway, so Splitgate 2 developer 1047 Games is laying off its developers and shutting down the original game. It's also like unreleasing Splitgate 2. It's trying to pull a Concord, I guess, or a marathon. Anyway, stating that Splitgate 2, that the game was not ready. We had ambitious goals with Splitgate 2, and in our excitement to share it with you, we bit off more than we could chew. Who's we? Who's we here? Upper management, probably. I'm sure the lower developers were like, this game's not fucking ready. Anyway, these are our teammates and our friends, and they helped build what we have today, but I am totally fine with throwing them under the bus and keeping my job, even though I made all the mistakes. Anyway, they're also going to be sunsetting the original Splitgate game to reduce server operation costs, because these cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past couple of years. Citation needed. They are looking into the possibility of offline matches in peer-to-peer multiplayer, but this is another stop killing games situation. It's like, here's a game people would have spent money on, or spent money in. I'm not sure what the payment model for Splitgate is. Is it a free-to-play game or what? But it is, in some ways, being pulled at very short notice. Anyway. This is the guy who wore the stupid hat, yes. So he wore a hat sporting the phrase "Make FPS Great Again" in an appearance at Summer Game Fest. Obviously the vibes are worse because of that hat, but I think that if it was a 10 out of 10 game that delivered on anything the community wanted, everything the community wanted, they would be playing it right now. No. They wouldn't. Just this stupid hat really just nuked the vibes. Anyway. At first, though, he declined to apologize for wearing the hat, saying it was not a political statement. I don't know how that can't be a political statement, but okay. He would then apologize 3 days later. So he's obviously known for making great decisions here. That's obviously pretty shit. There's no mention here of what they did to Splitgate 2, but Splitgate 2 is effectively going back into beta. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of layoffs and games coming out before they're ready, I guess. Anyway, Until Dawn devs supermassive layoff. Wait, Until Dawn devs supermassive layoff. Okay, up to 36 workers. I don't know why I had issue reading that title. And delay Directive 8020 into next year. So supermassive are the people behind Until Dawn, The Dark Pictures, and a bunch of other work for hire stuff. They do a lot of support work. Anyway. They've begun the consultation process because they're a UK-based company. Anyway, the redundancies will affect about 36 staff. As part of this, Directive 8020 has been delayed into next year. This will not have any effect on Little Nightmares 3. That was the other thing. I was trying to remember what other kind of big game they work on, which is scheduled for later in October. This is a challenging and ever-involving environment of the games industry right now. Yada yada. It is the convenient excuse that a lot of them come up with. Studio reportedly was laying off around 90 workers in February. It cited similar reasonings. This is not the first round of layoffs they've had this year. Good shit. I've talked before about how I felt Supermassive are stretching themselves too much. That they're working on too many projects at once. And I don't know if this is a case of the same thing, or if there's something else going on in the background. It seems odd that they would target one particular project over any other. On the other hand, it's possible that, like, I think it's Namco, Bandai Namco, who own Little Nightmares. Or the money they'd be getting from that one. It's probably going to be a lot more than they'll get from Directive 8020. Anyway. Speaking of, I've forgotten what the next thing is. Independence. All right. Anyway, another UK studio, I suppose. Chinese Room is independent again. Here's how it happened. So, Chinese Room, people behind Still Wakes the Deep, which you played on the channel, and are also going to be developing Vampire the Masquerade 2. They completed a management buyout from Sumo Digital. Sumo Digital are a Tencent-owned subsidiary who bought the Chinese Room in like 2018, something like that. I think they've only been with them for like one game at this point, maybe two. Anyway, we are continuing to work on original IP as well as with partner IP, just as we have with Still Wakes the Deep and Vampire the Masquerade with Paradox. The studio is currently working on 2 new unannounced IPs. It doesn't say if they're original, or sorry, not original, owned by the Chinese Room or if they're owned by somebody else. Anyway, the studio head has confirmed that there were layoffs as part of this. Yes, following the divestment process, a number of roles have been made redundant. It is not clear how many. They're not a publicly traded company, so they don't have to make that clear. They're currently 55 developers, which is kind of small, actually, for a development studio. Anyway, so why did they decide to buy themselves out? The Sumo Group in February announced that they were going to be focusing on development services rather than making their own games. So they were going to effectively have the Chinese Room become a support studio rather than a, what way to put it, but like a frontline development studio, being allowed to make their own games, that kind of thing. We had been working on new IP that needed investment, and that was no longer possible with Sumo's new model because Sumo didn't want to do their own games. They wanted to work as a support studio, or they wanted the Chinese Room to work as a support studio, so they felt this was the best time to buy themselves out. Anyway, and the rest of this just kind of points out that they used an investment firm to do it, and kind of the pedigree of people who are working on the Chinese Rooms, people coming from Bullfrog, EA, Lionhead. That's a lot of studios who've been fucked over by other people. Right? Anyway, you would think they'd want their independence very much. It's just these 3 right here. I should do it. Anyway, management buyout allows us to scratch the creative itch of continuing to work on new original intellectual property, but also to partner with other studios on other projects when they see fit. So it effectively allows them to keep doing what they're doing right now, which they seem to be happy with. And if they had stuck with Sumo Digital, they wouldn't be able to do that anymore. Hopefully they are also able to continue getting investment because they don't have Big Daddy Tencent anymore. Right, moving on. Last thing. Bullying works. Obsidian drops the Outer Worlds 2 down to $70. So when the Outer Worlds 2 was announced originally, it was going to be at the new, I guess, price for video games, $80. However, Xbox and Obsidian are changing course and have pushed the game back down to $70. And they had this kind of graphic and a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of satire thing that Outer Worlds is doing, even though it is somewhat an anti-capitalism game. They had this kind of big capitalist thing of pushing the game price to too much when people are fucking struggling. Anyway, if you'd had already pre-ordered the game at its higher price, you're going to have to jump through a couple of hoops to get the reduced price, get your deposit back or any of that kind of stuff, which is a bit shit. So if you did, get on that, get your $10 back. Anyway, what's not clear if this was really like a pushback from the community who were saying like this is too much money, or not just for the Outer Worlds 2, but just for video games in general. Like whatever, if you want to do your adjustment for inflation, wages have not been adjusted in that case. Anyway, it might also be a case of pre-orders maybe being a bit low. They might want, maybe they're trying to boost it, I don't know. Anyway, what's happening in the video game community instead? So we have a trailer here for Fallout Bakersfield, which is a Doom Total Conversion mod. If you're not familiar with what Doom Total Conversion mods are, they're basically Doom, the game, but they just change literally everything about the thing. So it's still running on like the Doom engine, although this is a like extremely heavily modified Doom engine at this point. There have been a lot of like really good community like total conversion mods for Doom and for other games as well. Anyway, this one I think it's kind of like trying to ape the first Fallout game, but like also be somewhat distinct so Bethesda don't give them shit. Anyway, let's skip ahead to some gameplay. But you can see they're kind of going for the Doom vibe with the head in the background and the head bobbing when you're moving as well, and that kind of stuff. But there's also a bit of the RPG element here on the bottom left. You can see in the console where it's talking about what you can see and things you can interact with and stuff like that. I don't think there's any like VATs or anything like that. There does appear to be. I'm going to try to skip ahead here a little bit because there is like dialogue options and stuff like that. I skipped too far ahead. You could talk to this guy, but then he just pulls out a gun and shoots you. Anyway, it's still very much Doom, but that's pretty cool. Release date, we don't know. It's 2020X, I believe. Skip too far ahead. Anyway, 2020 question mark. Maybe before 2030, I guess. Anyway, on some less good news, there's some shit happening over in the VTuber section of things. So Iron Mouse ignites VTuber exodus after accusing agency of failing to pay $500,000 that was owed to charity. If you're not familiar, Iron Mouse is pretty big VTuber streamer. And they had a subathon that was going towards the Immune Deficiency Foundation. They raised a lot of money. And that should have been paid to the charity, but 9 months later, that hasn't happened. So VShojo, who are the agency that represent Iron Mouse and a bunch of other VTubers, has failed to pay more than $500,000 to the charity, and not only that, they actually failed to pay like salary and stuff for a lot of other people. Anyway, so a video, YLF Shoujo or VShojo, they originally signed up around COVID time, allowed them to maintain their privacy and focus on streaming while the agency would handle the business side of things. So in general, the VTuber thing in the persona is mostly a privacy thing. You know, people don't want their face out on the internet, and that's fine. So they would have partnered up with VShojo because they would have said, hey, we'll handle the business thing, you know, we'll get you sponsorships and put you out into different things and pay you more money that you would be able to make on your own, this kind of thing. Anyway, VShojo, though, have allegedly stopped paying out funds that is owed to the VTuber and other VTubers, as it will transpire, and the charity that they had supported. I believe that I am owed a significant amount of funds, which I have not been paid, and most importantly, the Immune Deficiency Foundation is owed over $500,000 from VShojo. I really wish that I could tell you more, but right now I've been advised to wait for legal proceedings. As of right now, I am independent, so they've left the agency, and they're not the only VTuber that has left. Anyway, Iron Mouse suffers from an immunodeficiency order called common something. So they've been like frequently an advocate of the Immune Deficiency Foundation. They've run a number of charities or charity events for the charity, 4 million for the organization over their time streaming. Anyway, that money has allegedly never been paid out. A new campaign has raised $1 million. It's a goal of $1 million and has raised almost that amount. Anyway, they're not the only VTuber jumping ship. Kason is also jumping ship. My payment stopped last September. I was asking what's going on for a long time, multiple times. All they said was it's going to be paid, and it was never paid, and I don't think I ever will be. Anyway, they've also jumped ship. There's a couple of other embeds here from other VTubers who are doing the same thing. Of the 13 VTubers listed on their website, the majority have all posted messages either announcing that they are taking a break from streaming or saying that they're cutting ties with the talent agency in general. So good move there. Anyway, that wasn't the end though, because the CEO decided to finally speak out about what was happening. VTuber CEO admits to spending charity money as agency implodes. So the money's gone. They spent it. What did they spend it on? Well, we'll find out here in a second. So VShojo has revealed that the whole thing is shutting down. That's suspicious. You owe your employees, talent, whatever, money and charity money, and instead of doing anything about it, you're just gonna fucking bail. Okay. The CEO has even admitted to spending some of the charity money, all of the charity money, on trying to keep the business afloat. I acknowledge that some of the money spent by the company was raised in connection with talent activity, which I later learned was intended for a charitable initiative. We'll get back to that phrase in a second, because he didn't just learn that it was attached to a charity. He very much knew that already. Anyway, this is Justin Ignacio, the CEO of VShojo. claiming at the time that he didn't know. And there's a community note here that we'll get back to in a later. Anyway. So yeah, spent the money trying to get some more investment. Had raised 11 million a few years ago, and it seems that they had effectively been bleeding money ever since. Every member of its roster said they were either going, as I said. Many say they haven't been paid in months. It remains unclear how much money VShojo owes them and whether that money will ever be paid. I think it's important to point out, like, VTubers don't make like a shit ton of money. You know, a lot of them are like, this is just a standard job. And how well would you be doing if you missed a paycheck? 1 paycheck, 2 paychecks, 3. And it's been months. Not good. Anyway, that wasn't the end of it, because remember, we have that community note to go back to. So VShojo CEO's apology goes viral with community note calling him a liar. Good shit. And I do like this opening line. VShojo was a VTuber talent agency, because it's not anymore. Anyway, fans are not buying his explanation that, oh, I didn't know it was charity money. Fuck, he knew. He knew it was charity money. Anyway, Justin claims to not know the purpose of the funds, but he personally congratulated Iron Mouse on the completion of her charity fundraising event and reposted another YouTuber directly mentioning that half the funds would go to charity. So he knew. Justin claims to not know. He tweeted like, you did it, Iron Mouse, and so on. He very much knew what was going on. Anyway, another VTuber left VShojo back in 2023 and said, like, this isn't new. I only found out I didn't get paid for any of my sponsors after I had already signed the NDA. This is your reminder that NDAs are, in general, not legally enforceable if there has been illegal activity, like not paying you. Anyway, after 2 years, I've still not been paid back fully. To add insult to injury, they also demanded I had to pay them back $10K for some of the anniversary assets, which they then sent me back months later. They were half finished. There's fucking gall of these guys, right? Anyway, yeah, charity money taken, allegedly spent on investment, then lied about it, and now they're closing the company. Good shit. I keep forgetting where the camera is. The camera's usually here. I keep forgetting where it is. Anyway, we'll leave Wu Chang to play in the background. Anyway, that's your news for 21st, 27th July 2025. Sorry, the video is very late as it's midweek. Normally I try to get this out at the start of the week. But as you can see, I've changed location. I'm in my new place now-ish. I'm still kind of moving back and forth between the old and the new place. And trying to figure out where to put things. You can see the camera is a bit further away than I would like and this kind of thing. I still have to figure out where I can put the green screen and a lot of other things. So yeah, this layout might change, but this is effectively the new weekly news recap location. Anyway, some of that news is a little out of date, obviously, because things change. But we'll address that in the next weekly news recap, and hopefully that will be at the usual time. Anyway, I'm going to head off. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.